I know this is the way this looks to you. I know you feel like I'm always criticizing you.
Right.
I know you feel like I act like nothing you do is good enough. I know it looks like I hate all your friends.
You're like touching on all the chords right now. I'm going to start crying. So, oh.
And that's a demonstration of understanding the other side. You didn't agree with any of it.
No.
But you said, I know this is the way this looks to you. And that's when they feel respected. And that's when you demonstrate your behavior as a parent. What are you modeling for them? What you're modeling is you're not afraid of somebody else's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You're not afraid of anybody's point of view. And as a hostage negotiator, I literally am not afraid of anybody's point of view. That's why you could put me on the phone with somebody from Al-Qaeda. You could put me on the phone with somebody from Hamas, from the Islamic State. I'm not scared of how they see things. Yeah. Therefore, I'm not afraid to say it.
I want to set the scene for you a little bit. It's a cold, rainy day here in upstate South Carolina. I am sitting down in my basement studio. I have a warm cup of tea with honey. I have my puffer vest on, my cozy slippers, and of course my sweatpants, and I'm talking with you guys. It couldn't be a better day if I even tried. Welcome to the Paula Ferris Show, everybody. I'm your host, Paula, and I've been having so much fun engaging with you about the conversations we have been having lately, whether it's politics and how to effectively talk about politics with our kids and friends and family, to sex and having the sex talk with our kids when they're young, when they're old, and how we talk about our bodies with our kids. But this week, because I believe, and I have maintained for a very long time, that parents would make excellent hostage negotiators, we are going to be talking about how we can effectively negotiate with our kids, with our partners, and with our coworkers. Because whether we realize it or not, we are in negotiations every single day. So, who did I invite to the show? Of course I went there. I invited a former FBI hostage negotiator to the show to help us navigate this. His name is Chris Voss. He is the real deal. Y'all, he has a masterclass on the art of negotiation. So how is this going to play out in your life? Maybe you want your kid to go to bed on time, or you want them to listen to better music, wear different clothes, maybe find better friends, play less video games. Maybe at home, you want your partner to kind of pick it up and do more of their share around the home. Or at work, you want a raise, or you want a better schedule. Chris Voss is the guy that's going to help us figure all of this out through the art of negotiation. But before we jump in, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you who have written recent reviews on the show. There's a bunch of new reviews, and this doesn't just feed my ego, you guys. Yes, it's nice to hear what y'all are saying about the show, and I'm grateful for that. But it is truly important because these podcast platforms look at what shows have the momentum and look at what the engagement's like, and then they determine what shows they are going to promote on their own platform. So it's a big deal. We can continue to have these conversations, and I'm so grateful. Keep writing those reviews if you don't mind. And if you want to engage with me on Instagram, or you can write the review, but a great way to keep these conversations going is to sign up for my personal newsletter. I am giving away 5 copies of Sharon McMahon's new best-selling book, The Small and the Mighty. Of course, Sharon was a guest a couple of weeks ago on the show talking politics. Make sure you have signed up for my personal newsletter at paulaferrisofficial.com. We keep these conversations going. We keep it real. We keep it authentic, and we try to lift one another up. I want to preface this whole conversation with Chris Voss with this. I am not a perfect parent, and I am certainly not a gentle parent, because I freak out a lot, and I feel like that's the only way that I can get my kids to really pay attention. So make sure you lean in and listen and glean Chris's knowledge. He's going to tell us how we can effectively negotiate, also why we want our kids to say no. Really, we want our kids to say no. And make sure you stick around to after the conversation for my takeaways. I'm going to share a funny story about one of the tactics that Chris shared with me. I actually tried it on one of my children. It didn't have the effect that I was expecting. Without further ado, here is Chris Voss. Chris Voss joining the podcast. And I'm a little nervous because you're an FBI hostage negotiator, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to know what's happening during the interview because you're so skilled, and you're probably going to take it a direction I have no idea where it's going, Chris.
Well, all right. So the good thing about tactical empathy really is it is kind of invisible.
Yeah.
But if your core value is long-term success with people,
Right.
then it's a good adventure to go on.
Okay. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you again. Chris, you and I, and for those listening, had a chance to meet one another, had a chance to interview you on a big stage at the Global Leadership Summit. I don't even remember. Was that 5 or 6 years ago? We talked all about your book, Never Split the Difference, which has been a bestseller year after year after year. By the way, I still have the copy that you signed for my husband. Actually, he has the copy. You were so kind to autograph that. It's in his office. I stole this from his office for the interview. But I'm so excited to talk with you again.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this myself. Yeah, that conversation we had originally was great, and you
good.
had a spectacular journey yourself. So,
Thank
yeah, I
you.
love this.
I love that. You mentioned tactical empathy a second ago, and I want to really get into some of the key strategies that we as parents can really implement into our own lives. Because you say, we are, life is a negotiation, you say that, and how we can implement that into our lives, whether we're negotiating with our kids or, negotiating with our partners, whatever it may be. But before we jump in, tell us a little bit about your experience. You spent over 20 years with the FBI. You were their lead international hostage negotiator. So tell us a little bit about your experience and like how you got into this line of work to begin with, Chris.
No, it was just kind of a wild journey. I mean, after I joined the FBI, which I didn't plan to a year before, I wasn't even thinking about it. And when I thought about it, I was fortunate enough that they were hiring a lot of people. And then I didn't really want to go to New York, and they sent me to New York. It was part of the agreement to begin with. I remember the guy that recruited me said, "Don't take this job if you can't go to New York." And I was like, "All right, fair. I've been fairly warned. Okay." Got sent to New York, got on the terrorist task force, worked with great investigators.
Yeah.
And I think it was a real entree to hostage negotiation for me, because I'd been exposed to a couple of cops when I was with Kansas City, Missouri Police Department that got great cooperation by being nice and respectful instead of ordering and commanding. And then I landed with a bunch of investigators in New York that made great cases with people that cooperated with them voluntarily, not by having a hammer on them. I remember one of the NYPD, the chief of detectives in one particular case said, you got to have a hammer. If you haven't got a hammer on somebody, you're just wasting your time. And there were these guys that made cases without having a hammer, just by connecting with people.
Wow.
So when I finally found myself on a crisis negotiation team, and I spent some time on a crisis hotline to get there, volunteered on helpline founded by Norman Vincent Peale and his wife, Ruth Stafford Peale. Mm-hmm. This emotional intelligence thing, for lack of a better term, it was operational emotional intelligence. And it worked wonders very quickly.
Right.
And, that was kind of my journey. And then I was on the SWAT team. As much as I love SWAT, negotiation to me was so much more interesting and satisfying. So that when I got there, I was on a great ride.
You just mentioned something that I think we all have this perception that to negotiate, you have to have an iron fist. You have to rule with a hammer. You have to be dictatorial. You gotta, like Donald Trump, you're fired, But how, you learned along the way, it's tactical empathy. You can actually get what you want by being kind. And so it kind of flipped the script for you, right? Does negotiation need a rebrand? Because I feel like we have an idea of what it is, but you're saying it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It probably does need a rebrand. And if you're that kind of a negotiator, you don't really know what's happening, but people aren't coming to the table anymore. And they're much more leery, and then people start avoiding you. And that's what happens to the table pounding negotiator. People get the message that you only have conquered. You don't have people that are partners or collaborators. And when you're looking to partner with somebody long term, you don't want to be conquered. And then nobody really knows how it goes away or what happens.
Right. How important is this skill to learn, Chris? Because we're like, oh, well, I don't need to be an FBI hostage negotiator. But you say, and I think you make such a great point, that life is a negotiation. And throughout the day, we are negotiating time and time again. I think any parent could actually be like a brilliant hostage negotiator, because I just feel like having kids, I feel like it's a hostage negotiation situation every morning to get everybody out of the house. Parents could be brilliant hostage negotiators, but this is a skill you say we can learn. And whether or not we're aware of it, life is a negotiation. How many times are we negotiating each day? And we may not even realize it.
Well, I'm going to paraphrase or quote Elon Musk from a recent interview. Time is the ultimate commodity.
Yeah.
And time is what you're negotiating for in every interaction of collaboration. You're trying to get your kids out of bed. That's a time negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
Money as a commodity is rarely involved, but time is always involved.
Yes.
How quickly and how easily does somebody collaborate with the minimum amount of friction, complaining, or poor implementation? You could drag your kid out of bed and you come back 10 minutes later, they're back in bed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about friction. That's about collaboration. And that's in every negotiation. The people that work for me in my company, they pick up the skills really fast, not because they're around me, but because they're trying it at home with their families.
Oh, cool.
And they're eliminating friction in all of their everyday interaction, especially with their families. So it's more about the elimination of friction than the accomplishment of gain. And then suddenly they're happier. They love coming to work. I hear them using the skills on me because they used them at home.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. Do you have a family course, by the way, that you can teach? This might actually be it. This could be the thing that launches that, Chris, because I'm wondering, is that why every parent is so freaking exhausted by the end of the day? Because we have been negotiating all day and we have no idea that we've been in these negotiations.
Well, you kind of been doing a lot of Donald Trump demanding, threatening, and that tends to create a lot of friction long term is the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm exhausted by the end of the day. I just have to be honest. And getting my kids to do stuff, I'm trying to work through it. Sometimes gentle parenting works, sometimes it doesn't. But I honestly feel like the only time I can get their attention is if I freak out. So I don't want to be that
sometimes,
parent.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, you have to. So, okay.
And if I I remember seeing a funny meme a couple years ago that said, this parenting stuff is really difficult. It's really exhausting. I think I'm going to try something easier like hostage negotiation.
It's so true, right? I mean, it's so true. Well, what you said was so fascinating that so many of your staff are implementing these principles and strategies at home because we are negotiating throughout the day, whether we're negotiating with our spouse to do more around the house or spend more time with us, or we're negotiating with our kids. I can just think about the things I'm trying to negotiate with my kids. Can you listen to better music? I don't really like that boy or girl that you're dating. Can you play less video games? Can you go to bed on time? All these negotiations. So what I'd love for you to do, Chris, is just kind of guide us through some of your key strategies and principles. And yes, you and I have talked before, so I know we're going to talk about mirroring. You're going to probably talk about tactical empathy, the power of an open-ended question, and getting them to say yes by saying no. So what are some of your top strategies that we as parents can implement into our lives to just give us a freaking break, and so we can be a little less stressed?
Well, some of the things that create friction, in families, parents, children, start off with, the issue of autonomy. I mean, you're trying to teach your kids to be autonomous, and at the same time, when you order them around, you're taking away their autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So switching from yes to no happens to increase people's feelings of autonomy. Are you against doing this? Is this a bad idea? Would you hate me if I asked this of you?
Okay.
And these, first of all, switching from yes to no makes people feel like they're retaining their autonomy more, because if the answer to anything is yes, there's always a hook.
So this is where we want to get them to say yes by saying no, correct?
Yes,
okay, so give me an example. So let's say I'm trying to get my kid to go to sleep on time. Give me an example of how I would implement this.
All right. So on a yes or no one, the question would be, are you against going to bed at 9:00?
No.
There you go. You got to start.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the first word that kids learn, generally speaking?
No. Or
Yeah.
dad. It's not mom. It's dad or no.
Yeah, and the unfortunate disadvantage there, I think dad rolls off the tongue easily, so they start going da da,
It does.
and then mom is like, "I'm doing all the work. You show up for half an hour a day," and he says your name.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so explain this a little bit more about how we go about getting them to say yes by saying no. And by the way, I do this in business too. I've learned, and my husband has actually been the one that loves this. He's helped me in business situations how we can get people to say yes by saying no. Like, would it be ridiculous to have this finished by the end of day? No, it wouldn't. But they're saying yes. So the psychology behind that, you said, is the feeling of autonomy. Is that what it is, Chris?
Well, when somebody says no, they feel they've kept themselves safe and protected. In most negotiations, your first job for collaboration is to remove yourself as a threat. If you're threatening, they don't feel safe and protected. So how do I start making them feel safe and protected right away? It's a Pavlovian response that if you say yes to something, you've exposed yourself to something you haven't seen. And if you say no to something, you protected yourself.
Okay.
So the actually saying yes makes people feel anxious. Hearing yes is a whole different feeling. Hearing it feels wonderful, but saying it makes you wonder what you're letting yourself in for.
Interesting. Okay.
Hearing no until you realize that it's not a bad thing. But people don't like to hear no, but they love to say it.
Right.
Parents love to say no. Dad, can I? No. And then that was me with my 17-year-old. But I noticed every time when I'd interrupt to say no afterwards, then I'd stop and think for a second. And then I go like, okay, what is it that you wanted? Having said no as a parent, I felt I was safe in hearing them out. I hadn't committed myself to it in any way. So at all ages, once you start getting bamboozled by yes and no, no makes you feel safe and protected, which means your mind is clearer to see things instead of digging in over your autonomy. You're always telling me what to do. You make me do things. You never listen to me. All that nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. How would you use this principle of getting them to say yes by saying no, which again makes us feel safer if we can say no? So we just did it with bedtime. Are you opposed to going to bed at 9? And they're going to say no. Okay, but let's use it with this example. Like, let's say I want my daughter to listen to better music. How would we implement this and negotiate this?
Well, say something like, are you closed-minded about the kind of music that you listen to?
No, of course she's going to say no to that, but she's...
Of course, right? But feeling no, and then you let that sink in. As it sinks in, then people are a little more curious as to what you have in mind. But it's the initial interaction that is the gateway that either closes or opens the door. And trying to get somebody to say yes to something or telling them something starts to close the door as opposed to leaving them open-minded for the next moments. What you're trying to do is negotiating for somebody's undivided attention, and it's only undivided if they don't feel threatened. Because if they feel threatened, it's clearly divided. So how do you go for longer periods of time? We've got somebody's undivided attention.
Okay.
And it comes at you in increasing increments as you respect their autonomy along the way. Now, as a parent, you might think, well, my kid doesn't have enough brains yet. I got to tell them what to do. Respecting their autonomy
their frontal lobe doesn't close, like a boy's frontal lobe doesn't close till 25. So there's a little truth to that. Although girls' development stops between 18 and 19. So there's a little truth to that.
There's a fair amount of truth. But in the meantime, what you're trying to do is actually help them think.
Critical thinking, smart. Yeah.
And so as soon as, there's kind of 3 steps. First of all, get out of yes, because yes is a trap. It's always a trap. It doesn't take you kids long to figure out if they say yes to anything you say, you got a trap that is waiting to spring on them.
Okay.
And they can figure that out in a hurry. Now, most parents have the how and what questions down pretty good because how and what helps people think. The big mistake that parents make over and over again is there's a difference between showing interest and making somebody feel heard. How was your day? What did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times with that, with your kid, especially teenagers, fine. I
Good.
forget.
Uh-huh.
Why do they respond like that? Because whenever they answered, what you did was immediately go to the next question.
Mm.
How was your day? They answered. What did you learn? You didn't listen to the answer. Now, maybe you did, but they have no way of knowing you did.
Mm.
And that's where this thing called mirroring really comes into play.
I love mirroring so much. It's so good.
Because at least you showed that you heard what they said. How was your day? Fine. You can say, fine. And then your kid is going to go like, holy cow, this is the first time you didn't proceed to the next question.
Uh-huh.
And I have so many parents, and I don't know if there's data selection on our part. We hear it more back from mothers with their daughters that I've got my daughter to open up to me in ways that she never has just by mirroring her.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure it is equally applicable with sons and fathers, but most often I've heard it more with mothers and daughters.
Right. I will say, my middle son, JJ, has listened to several of your podcasts, and he's like really fascinated by this, but he's also my quiet one, and it's hard to get him to open up. And I do ask those, I don't ask closed-ended questions like, did you have a good day? I say, what was the best part of your day? And he'll be like, nothing. Right. But he has listened to the podcast, and I have started to mirror him, and he's like, Mom, you're mirroring me. I know exactly what you're doing. So, but it is working with him. And it's not just a great tactic for your kids, but it's a great tactic in all conversation and relationship. And Chris, when I learned about this, I started implementing it into a lot of my interviews. You know, as a journalist, mirroring, you get them to open up by repeating the last 2-3 words that they just used. So tell us a little bit about more the strategy of why mirroring works. And you explained it a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper about how it disarms and how it gets our kids and our families and our partners to open up by mirroring is the tactic.
Yeah, and let's just be really crystal clear on this is not body language mirroring. You know, most people think of mirroring, they're like, I got to imitate their body language.
Sure.
I got to imitate everything about them. And then they feel we're alike and they'll listen to me. And so this is not that at all.
Okay.
The hostage negotiators mirror, the black swan tactical empathy mirror is specifically, just as you said, repeating the last 1 to 3-ish words of what they just said. So the first thing is it shows you were listening because you threw the words right. You repeated the words right back to them. Like there's no doubt that you heard the words. So they start to feel heard right off the bat, which is the key to opening up. Now, the rest of the mechanism, for whatever reason, they will expand. And it's so much better than, what did you mean by that? Or tell me more or say more about that. You know, all these different actual open-ended questions or things that orders that masquerade as open-ended questions. You know, tell me more about that. Is not an open-ended question. It's a statement. It's an order. Even if they take it as an open-ended question, they're extremely likely to simply respond with the exact same words, only louder. Like you're hard of hearing, and I got to say it again.
Right.
So when you repeat the words, the other person in their brain said, okay, so they got the words. I don't need to repeat them louder. But they showed interest. They showed curiosity. And there's this automatic rewording and expansion that goes on in the other person's head. It helps them think. You know, it helps them look for a fuller explanation without being annoyed at you for not getting it the first way that they said it. Because like me, like if I say I had a tough day and they go like, what do you mean by a tough day? And I might say, what do you mean? What do I mean? Tough day. What the hell's the matter with you? But if I said I got a tough day and somebody then mirrors and says, tough day?
Tough day?
Then I'd be like, yeah, you know, this and that and this and that. And I'd lay it out.
Yeah. Let's role play in the mirroring. So ask me a question and I'm going to respond and then you're going to show everybody. And you already gave a couple of examples, but let's just try it right now. Let's see what you can get me to say.
Ask your question.
Yeah, anything, and then just mirror. Or maybe I could do something for you. So,
Hold on. I just married you.
I didn't even know you did that. I was like, come on, Chris, you know what I'm talking about.
And then you went on and you said that, and then you suggested some other ideas. And so we just did the perfect demo for everybody.
That was so great. I didn't even know you were implementing it. And that's the thing, because it disarms us, right? And it gets us to open up more. Okay, so mirroring. So the first thing is you get them to say yes by saying no, because we feel like we have agency and we have power when we respond with the no. If we respond yes, we're anxious, okay? The other one that you just said is mirroring. Okay. You mentioned tactical empathy, and the most important thing when negotiating is tactical empathy. And again, life is a negotiation. As parents, we are negotiating with our kids and our partners and our community all day long. So again, it's countercultural to what we've heard, that we have to rule with this iron fist. But why is tactical empathy so important? And before you even explain it, Chris, maybe tell us what it actually is, like tactical. I think we all know what empathy is, but what is tactical empathy?
Well, a lot of people see empathy as being synonymous with sympathy, and it's not. If you back it off a little bit and just take empathy as being able to understand without agreeing or disagreeing,
right?
Which means, by that definition, someone from Hamas can demonstrate empathy with somebody from Israel, because it's neither agreement nor disagreement. Somebody from Israel can demonstrate empathy towards someone from Hamas, because it's not agreement or disagreement. Now, that's where it gets really tricky. But the great challenge, you and I agree, it's easy for me to demonstrate understanding. The great challenge for connection with me as a human being, which is ridiculously disarming, is what if we both know we don't agree, and suddenly I start saying, this is how you feel about this. And the walls come down. And what always happens is that people are drawn closer to a collaborative relationship. Now, the issue is, how far are they drawn? And my answer to that is, does it matter? Because if you're in a dispute with someone, you're facing different aspects of the same problem. If you're in a negotiation with someone, you're facing different aspects of the same problem. And drawing us closer together is never a bad thing. Now, will it always solve the problem? No. Now maybe we get to the point where we have to understand that there might be, maybe you get to bargaining at that point in time. Ideally, great negotiation goes so well that you never bargain. And then if you bargain, then instead of splitting the difference, what's the blend of ideas?
Okay.
That creates a better outcome.
Got it. So tactical empathy. Give me an example of tactical empathy in a conversation I might have with my daughter, or something that I know a lot of parents with daughters struggle with is the way that they dress. How do we have that conversation about their clothes? We don't want them to, we want them to dress a certain way, but also they need to have their autonomy. How would we implement tactical empathy into a conversation about how they're dressing?
All right. So you say, before I take issue with you about the clothes you've chosen to wear, I just want to make sure that I can say from your perspective what makes it a good idea. Now, I know I'm going to sound like the typical annoying know-it-all parent who doesn't care what you think and thinks all your friends are bad and doesn't care if your life ends, and all I want you to do is forget about your social circle. So that's the articulation of their point of view. Now, you never said you agreed.
No,
As a matter of fact, you demonstrated a higher level of empathy when you say, I know this is how it's going to look.
Sure.
There's kind of three levels there. And one is like, it seems like, which is tentatively a hypothesis you're not sure about.
It seems like, okay.
It probably seems like.
Okay.
Which is, enough more about it to say, not just possibly, but probably.
Okay.
And the I know is necessary on their point of view with someone that you got a massive amount of time with. They don't want you to be tentative in what their point of view is. They figure if you don't know, you're an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a higher level and saying, I know this is the way this looks to you. I know you feel like I'm always criticizing you.
Right.
I know you feel like I act like nothing you do is good enough. I know it looks like I hate all your friends.
You're like touching on all the chords right now. I'm going to start crying. So, oh.
And that's a demonstration of understanding the other side. The requisite is what's their perspective and how accountable do they feel you should be for your knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
Should you be wondering or should you know? You didn't agree with any of it.
No.
But you said, I know this is the way this looks to you. And that's when they feel respected. And that's when you demonstrate your behavior as a parent. What are you modeling for them? Well, you're modeling is you're not afraid of somebody else's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
You're not afraid of anybody's point of view. And as a hostage negotiator, I literally am not afraid of anybody's point of view. That's why you could put me on the phone with somebody from Al-Qaeda. You could put me on the phone with somebody from Hamas, from the Islamic State. I'm not scared of how they see things. Yeah. Therefore, I'm not afraid to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could say, I know all day long. I know you feel this way. And I don't have to follow up with an argument. My first move is to lay it out there and show them that I'm so unafraid of being respectful that I don't have got to follow up with an argument. I'm going to wait for you to respond. What I'm really doing when I'm waiting instead of following up with the argument is I'm letting the magic of empathy sink in. Neurochemicals are triggered when you do this. And as a practitioner, I'm not going to follow up with the argument right away. Yes, but this is why that's not true. I'm being quiet because I know that I've triggered neurochemicals in you and I want them to sink in. I want them to have all the changes I know they're going to make.
And so by doing this, you just kind of tee them up to respond and really to open up. They feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel respected.
And all those things are true and essential. And what it also does for whatever reason is it triggers their thinking brain. I heard another guy talking about it once, and I can't remember who it was. He said, empathy is a species of reason. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can get you to reason and analyze if I use it on you. I'm trying to trigger your better, higher level thinking.
Right.
And so when I let that sink in, all these higher level functions of thinking are kicking into gear, increasing the chances you're going to make a good decision.
Right. Okay. So we've got mirroring, getting them to say yes by saying no, and then tactical empathy, which is just, when you were listing all of those things, I was getting emotional because I was like, oh my gosh, I feel seen and heard, even though that wasn't that, I know that's exactly how my daughter would feel, right? She would feel seen and heard and respected. And again, so triggering the critical thinking is so good. Chris, are there any other strategies that we need to know as parents besides those three? And I know you have a lot of strategies to begin with, but I think those are some of the strategies we can implement right away and notice a big difference.
Well, the one thing about the what and how questions,
okay.
Which you have as a skill set, and you have seen the difficulty that your child has answering it occasionally. The one shortcoming of a what or how question is it takes what Danny Kahneman called deep thinking to answer it. And sometimes your child, it's not that they're not answering because they don't want to. They're already exhausted. Like I don't have anybody in my company ask me what or how questions after 3:00 in the afternoon because I don't have enough mental gas in a mental gas tank to answer.
Right.
Now I can answer at 10:00 in the morning. So I might instead come in with what we call a label, and you might say, what was most interesting thing about your day? How do you make that a label? You would say, seems like something interesting must have happened to you today.
Okay.
It's not as exhausting to answer.
Right. Instead of what was the best part about your day? That's what I ask the kids every time they get in the car because I don't want to say how was your day? I say, what was the best part about your day? again, not asking the what or how question, but seems like something interesting happened today.
Yeah.
Love to hear
Just
about
throw
it.
it out tentatively and
Okay.
then let them reflect on it. It's easier thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You're much more likely to get a response that they don't have to labor over before they give it back to you.
Okay. So avoid the what and the how question.
It's a little bit tougher when people are tired.
It's like, exactly. And I'm always, I feel like I'm mentally drained with kids, especially having two teenagers, two high schoolers and a fifth grader who has all the attitude in the world lately. You posted something, Chris, that I really loved on Instagram. It was this. It says, during disagreements, the moment that you attack, instead of repeating what they just said, even though you disagree, you have lost.
Yeah.
I think this is a tactic that it's mirroring, right? Instead of repeating what they just said, but it's especially, I think, beneficial in relationships because so much of the tension at home is not just what's going on with the kids, but what's going on with your partner. And maybe, like, let's say there's stress and tension over who's doing what around the house. I know my husband, John, and I, that's a big argument. Who's doing what? I feel invalidated sometimes because he's not chipping in. So how could we implement what you just talked about during the disagreement instead of attacking, just repeating what they just said? Like, how could he use that to disarm me or vice versa? How could I use that to disarm him?
It takes practice, and implementing it in the heat of the moment is impossible.
Yeah.
But what you can do is if you've got a discussion that went poorly that you would have liked to improve on, you can go back and re-edit the video in your head.
Okay.
Because what Elon Musk has discovered with Neuralink recently is imagining doing something into your brain is the same as doing it. And that's why they got Nolan imagining doing stuff, and through Neuralink, it's happening. So what does that mean for you? If you would have a conversation that went bad that you would like to approach differently, then imagine doing it again and approaching it differently. That increases the chance when it happens live, you will. And how might you approach it differently? And you might say, look, before I disagree, here's how I think you see this. You think I'm lazy. You feel unappreciated for what you do. And you feel that every time you do the slightest little thing, instead of having that appreciated, you get yelled at because it's not enough. Mm-hmm. Now, that's the other person's perspective. Most people say, well, if I say it out loud, speak the devil to existence, it's going to make it worse.
Sure.
As opposed to the other person suddenly feels validated and they kick in again their analysis, their species of reason, and they reassess their negative emotional reaction to what happened up to that point in time. And that's pretty much every couple's complaint.
Yeah.
Like every time I do something right, instead of getting appreciated, I get complained at because it wasn't enough. So why should I do anything?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're saying imagine doing it differently, that conversation and how that's going. It's almost like visualizing. I mean, I know I visualize a lot in work and speaking engagements. I visualized in my golf lesson yesterday, and I actually it was my second golf lesson ever, and I hit the cover off the ball, so it helped. I will say that. It really worked. But visualizing and imagining doing it differently before you're having that conversation the next time. But again, during disagreements, instead of attacking, just repeat what they just said, even though you disagree.
And you could even say, before I disagree, here's what I think your point of view is. Mm-hmm. If you even get that out of your mouth, you will have dissipated some of the negative energy that's both driving you and making you dumber simultaneously.
And it's so interesting too, it's the invalidation, I think, that can just build up, and that resentment that can build up, and you feel that you're not heard, or you do feel like you're not respected. And that's, again, where the technical empathy can come into. Chris, have you ever lost a negotiation with your children? You have a son. I know that.
Oh, right? I make mistakes all the time.
Okay.
And there've been, again, it's how tired am I? How much have I failed to dissipate my negative thoughts leading up? Usually if you have an argument with somebody, and it's not that person's fault, and they know it, which is why they resent having the argument. But I remember seeing something maybe a year ago that said, somebody who's an alcoholic, you can tell 2 or 3 days before they're going to start drinking again because there's been an accumulation of events.
Mm.
So 2 to 3 days, if you know them, in 3 days, they're going to be drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of human behavior. So if I snap at somebody, 3 or 4 other things have gone wrong already that day, and I'm letting them eat at me. And then the last person is getting the brunt of the built up frustration. So that happens to me because I'm human. And your question is, did I ever lose arguments or did I ever do a horrible job with either my son or my significant other?
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, without question. Now, once we catch ourselves, both my son and I and my girlfriend and I, Wendy, we're pretty good at coming back some period of time later and going back and fixing it because we're confident that we actually have the tools to go back and mend fences. And then the issue is always, are you going to walk the talk? That's the real thing with fixing things with someone who has a lot of exposure to you. Mm-hmm. Are you going to walk the talk?
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Yeah. And I think we have to take into account we are negotiating every day, even though we may not realize it. And sometimes you said we're just tired. Like my kids wear me out at the end of the day. And sometimes it's just like, whatever, I don't even want it. Like, just do it. I don't have the brain space to negotiate. And, especially with that youngest kid, we have 3 and he gets away with quite a bit, my older 2 say, because I'm like, just at that point, I'm like, I can't, I don't even have the capacity.
Yeah, go ahead and put the frog in a microwave. I'm just too tired to say it's a bad idea.
We're not that bad. I would step up and say something about that. Again, you have masterclass, you do corporate training, and you have this new documentary out. Tell us a little bit about it. I haven't checked it out yet. I'm so excited to go watch it. I didn't even know that it was out there. Tell us a little bit about it.
It just got out there. Nick Nanton, DNA Films, Nick's won 22 Emmys, and he's a great business partner. And the documentary, it's on Amazon, it's called Tactical Empathy.
Okay.
And it tells the story of several different kidnappings, cases that I worked with internationally. They didn't all go well.
Right.
And you either win or you learn. Mm. And so I learned some stuff along the way.
That's good. You win or you learn. It's not win or lose. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, win or learn. And so then we also show how we applied some of the ideas in business. And then there's a really good segment of my son teaching, tactical empathy, crisis intervention to New York City police detectives. Chris Swanson from Michigan is in there. And during the riots in the streets, when there was a tremendous amount of social unrest, Chris Swanson led the way with, instead of going knuckles to knuckles with protesters with riot gear, they took their helmets and their batons off, and Chris Swanson walked out there and started to embrace the protesters over the Black Lives Matter stuff and the George Floyd problems, and hugged them, and had tremendous impact positively in avoiding riots and making people who were against the police feel heard and understood. And there's a segment in there about that. I'm very proud that Sheriff Swanson was involved in it and agreed to be in the documentary also.
That's brilliant. Talk about tactical empathy. And that's an Amazon documentary, correct?
It's on Amazon. It's called Tactical Empathy.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
I'd love it if you'd watch it. I'd love it think of it, if you rate it, think of it, as an Uber rating,
Yes.
I'm going to be very selfish and want that 5-star, but I'd love for you to watch it and enjoy it.
Chris, where can people stay in touch with you? Like I said, I know you have a newsletter and you have, your book, and you've got the documentary, you do corporate training. There's also a really cool test on your website. You can find out what type of personality type you have as a negotiator. Mine is the accommodator. So that was really fascinating to hear.
There are 3 types, and each type is their main trait is both essential and inadequate.
Okay.
And so whatever your skill is, it's a great skill. Mm-hmm. And there's some companion skills that'll make it even more effective. So the website is Black, BLACK, Swan, SWAN, LTD, like limited, blackswanltd.com. And I love that you took the types test and
Good.
it triggered some thinking.
It really did. And it was, very profound, but it's always good to know your proclivities. And, I like to see my blind spots, and I like to learn more about my personality and how I'm perceived too. And I've always been told that I'm disarming in interviews, and people open up to me. And I think it's like, I want people to feel comfortable. Maybe that's the accommodator in me, but then I can go in and ask a hard question. But like you said, there's some inadequacies there too. So I think the more self-aware we can be, the better. So you're doing great work, Chris. Really great work. If you ever want to borrow 3 children, including 2 teenagers and a tween, and just implement some of these strategies, I'll loan them to you.
Well, how do we feel about child labor? I might violate some of the child labor law.
Please do. Oh, Chris, this has been really great. Is there anything else you want our audience to know about you, about what you've got going on, how they can stay connected? Is there anything else you want to share?
Check out the website, watch the documentary, and use empathy to make people feel heard.
Yeah, it's really great. The world needs more of your message too. So empathy, lead the way. It is definitely, I think, one of the greatest skills that leaders can learn and leaders can implement is leading with empathy. And that does not mean you're soft. That does not mean that you're soft. So I think empathy also needs that rebrand. But Chris, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom with the audience and with me. It was a great refresher too. So, and I will now put John's book, Never Split the Difference, which you, again, kindly autograph for him. I'll go put it back in his office because he will notice if it's missing.
I don't know why you don't have your own copy.
How do I not have my own copy? I mean...
I got your book.
See, there you go. And I don't... Yeah, I need a copy of your... I'm just going to go buy one. I'm going to go buy one on Amazon.
Well, maybe I need to send you one.
Okay, well, then maybe you can autograph mine.
I'll do that.
You'll do that?
Yep.
I just mirrored you.
I'll be happy to do that. Nice.
I tried to mirror you.
Got me going.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris, so much. Okay, before I share with you my takeaways and the funny story about one of the tactics I implemented with one of my children and how it kind of backfired, I just want to say, you guys basically just got a masterclass for free. Chris teaches a masterclass on the art of negotiating, and he gets paid a lot of money to speak at leadership events, to teach these tactics. And let's just give him some love. Give him a follow on Instagram. Also, if you want to check out his documentary, which he said is out on Amazon, called Tactical Empathy, if you want to watch it, rate it. He's a great follow also on socials. And if you want to learn your style of negotiating, again, we are negotiating every single day, whether we realize it or not. Go to his website, blackswanltd.com. Again, that's blackswanltd, like limited.com. You can figure out what kind of negotiator you are. I learned I'm an accommodator. I think we can learn a lot about ourselves by learning what style of negotiator we are. Okay, so it is time for my takeaways. Number 1, mirroring. I do this so much when I interview people, and Chris clearly turned the pages on me in that interview, which I had no idea he was doing, but you're honestly just repeating the last 2 to 3 words that someone says to you. Okay, this is a great way to get your kids to open up, a great way to get your partner to open up, a great way to get your coworkers to open up. He says the moment that we attack instead of repeating what someone just says, we have lost that negotiation. So you mirror them. You literally just repeat the last 2 to 3 words that they have said, and it gets them to open up. So that's the first tactic, mirroring. The second tactic is tactical empathy. This is essentially saying we understand without agreeing or disagreeing. And as Chris said, this is something a lot of us parents are failing at. And you use tactical empathy to make people feel seen and heard. He says it's one of the greatest skills that we can have as leaders. It doesn't mean that we're soft. Now, how would this play out in a scenario? As Chris said, let's say we're negotiating their clothes or whatever it is. And you'll say, before I say anything about your clothes, I know I'm going to sound like a typical parent that thinks your friends are bad, doesn't care if your life ends. You're articulating their point of view. When you say, I know how this is going to look, or it seems like, you've demonstrated a higher level of empathy, it takes their guard down. Another way this could play out is saying, I know this is the way it looks to you. I know you feel like I'm always criticizing you. I know it feels like I hate all your friends. And what you're doing is you're touching on all of those chords. That is tactical empathy. The last tactic, my favorite, but I think also one of the more difficult ones to implement, because I have to think about it a lot, is you get them to say yes by saying no. As Chris said, when we say no, we feel power. When we say yes, we feel powerless. The first word that we learned as kids was no. That's the first word our kids are going to say and our kids are going to learn. So this might be how it plays out in business. Would it be ridiculous to think we could get a call on the books before end of week? And what are they going to say? No. They're saying yes by saying no. Okay, so how does this play out with our kids? Like Chris said, maybe we want them to listen to better music. I know I certainly would love that. If my kids listen to better music, we could say, are you closed-minded to the kind of music that you listen to? No, I'm not, but they're saying yes. Let's say we want our kids to go to bed at their bedtime. You would say, are you opposed to going to bed at 9 o'clock? Or do you have something against going to bed on time? All right, so you guys, in all honesty, I tried this with Landon. And I said, Landon, do you have something against going to bed at 9 o'clock? And what do you expect him to say? No, I don't, Mom. You know what he said to me? He said, no, do you? And he turned it right back on me and I just had to laugh. I literally got him to say yes by saying no, but then he turned it right back. And as Chris said, we're going to fail in some of our negotiations. It's not totally about cooperation, but it's making them feel seen and heard and feeling like they have some power in the equation. But get them to say yes by saying no. And that's how it turned out for me. No, I don't, Mom. Do you? All right. You got to have one in the family, right? That's just going to put you in an early grave. That's my youngest for me. A couple of reminders. Again, giving away 5 copies of Sharon McMahon's new book, the #1 New York Times bestselling book, The Small and the Mighty. Make sure you're signed up for my personal newsletter at paulaferrisofficial.com. Also, all of my clothes from TV, beautiful clothes. You are getting them for like a fraction of the price through the Saved collection. I've slashed everything. It's half off through the holidays. I'll link to that in the show notes. You can pick up some beautiful pieces that all have a story, by the way. I mean, if you buy something, you say, hey, Paula, I bought this shirt or this skirt. Send me a picture. And I'm going to tell you the story behind it, where I was when I wore it, who I interviewed. Super fun. All right, coming up on the show, we are having some incredible, timely conversations for the holidays. We're having a conversation about navigating in-laws in the holidays. How do you know and how do you determine whose house you go to for the holidays and navigating that sometimes precarious in-law relationship, which I do think sometimes gets a bad rap. We're going to talk to the creator of The Chosen, Dallas Jenkins. John and I are in conversation with him to talk about some of our favorite holiday movies, but also really great content that we can share with our teens and tweens and our children. And also, I shared on Instagram, we went on our very first college visit. And we're going to tell you all about that experience and whether or not I embarrassed our daughter, Caroline. Keep sharing with me the things you want to talk about. I'll see you right here next week, everybody. Thanks for joining. And I'm going to go back to drinking my tea. Bye. I know you guys thought you were done with me, but not quite yet. I have one more thing to tell you about. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe to the show. I don't want you to miss a single beat or a single conversation. And remember, my DMs are always open. Tell me what you want to talk about.